Okay, so have you ever heard someone say that law school doesn't really teach you how to lawyer, whatever that means? Well, I guess there's some truth to that. I think there are some doctrinal classes that definitely prepare you about the law, but there's one thing in law school that definitely prepares you to be a lawyer, and that's law school clinics. So if you're preparing to go to law school, or if you're in law school now, I want to say that take at least one law school clinic before you graduate, and you won't regret it. I'm going to talk about why. But first, if you're new to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell so that you're the first to see content when we post every Sunday. If you come here every week to see new content, make sure you hit that like button so that you can see more content from us every single Sunday. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick rundown about what a clinical program does and why you should take it. So a clinical program is a hands-on program where you provide pro bono services to the underrepresented. And at some schools, it's an elective. At my particular law school, it was required us to have 2 actual clinical programs before we graduated. And we basically did everything a lawyer would do, except we didn't get paid for it. It was for credit. But it basically prepares you for everything. You had to do client intake. You have to do billable hours. You have to learn how to work with clients, file particular documents. All the things that you know lawyers are going to have to do, you have to do as a student attorney. And for me, I actually did over 750 hours of clinical work during my 2 clinics. And for others, it may vary about how many hours you're required to do. It is time consuming, but it is so rewarding to know that you're helping people who would not otherwise be able to have this kind of legal support. If you watch my other video about what I learned, 5 things I wish I knew before I went to law school, that's one of the top things that I wish I knew. Like, people don't have access to this kind of support, the legal support. And if your law school offers that program, it is such a help to some people who it becomes a difference between being able to stay in their home or being evicted. So go ahead and see which law school clinic most interests you and see where you can feel like you can do the most impact. And I would say, go ahead and apply. I know for some law schools, you actually have to apply to become part of the clinic. And other ones, even at my law school, you had to rank it from your top 5, and then they would pick because everybody can't get their first choice. But definitely see what choices are out there for your law school clinics, because that's where you're going to get in the nitty gritty. You're going to actually learn the stuff that you learn in Civ Pro, the stuff that you're learning in property, in contracts. You're going to actually be applying those things in a law school clinic. So I would say do a law school clinic for sure. Another reason you should do a law school clinic, and this is just an aside, is when I did one of my law school clinics, we worked with a big law firm in the city I was in law school, which is DC, and they have their own pro bono department, and they were volunteering their services of their attorneys to help out with our law clinic. And so if you're interested in actually working for any of these law firms, you participating in this law school clinic can be your little step in the door. Show them what you're made of. Show them that you can do whatever is required. And when it comes time to apply for a job, they like, I remember them when they did that law school clinic. We worked with them. They were really hands-on. They knew what they were talking about. They seemed very smart. They had common sense. Those little things will help you along the way if that's your journey that you want to go to. That wasn't my particular journey, but I know that if I wanted to have a foot in the door, I'm working hand in hand with these people, emailing them, talking to them on the phone, going to meetings with them. They got to know us a lot during that particular clinic. And so if nothing more, if you want to have it be a step in the right direction for a particular job in the future, usually some law firms usually work with the law school clinics to help do some pro bono hours as well. So one of the first clinics I did in law school was the community development clinic. And during my semester, it was at a point where one of our clients had recently obtained the right to convert from a tenant association to a co-op. And it was a long backstory to it, but basically they were able to win the right to have ownership over their particular building. It was in an area that was being gentrified. They were prevented from having an investor come in and swoop down and take their building from them and turn it into high-rise condos, really expensive condos. So our job was to help them create ownership of their building. We had to create bylaws. We had to explain what bylaws were, issue shares, tell them how it basically all it worked. In order to do that, we had to figure out how it worked. And that was a high learning curve because we were like, okay, we don't even know what's going on. We had to bring ourselves up to speed. And then this is the kicker, because if you don't know what you're talking about, you're not going to be able to explain it to someone else. So that is why a clinical program is important, because we had to learn the information and then turn around and explain it to our clients who had no idea. Actually, some of our clients were functional illiterates. So trying to explain high-level legal terms that we just found out ourselves to someone who doesn't even know how to read, it definitely was a challenge, but we knew we were empowering them. So basically, hours, many evenings, hours and hours explaining information to them. And I think Albert Einstein said that, like, if you can't explain it to someone like a 5-year-old, then you don't really understand the information. That's true. So we had to make sure we understood it. We broke it down to them, and then they were like, okay, they understood why they now had some property ownership rights and what they needed to do to maintain it. We had to do some filings with the DC government. We had to make sure they had a property management company that wasn't stealing from them. All these things in the clinic. And it was, like I said, it was tiring, but it was so rewarding because we knew that in the heart of DC, they had this building that had rent secure prices, and they won't be kicked out and not be able to live in the home that they've lived in for many years. So that was one of the first clinics I did in law school. So it's, there's always good and bad when it comes to things. So as part of the clinic, this particular clinic, you had to work with a team. And let me just tell you, sometimes working with a team is good. Sometimes it brings its own challenges. And this one was not without its challenges. We were in a group, I believe, of 4 or 5 people. And because there was a lot to get done. And there was not always times when people were pulling their own share, how I felt like it. And so we had to find a way to work with each other, because at the end of the day, your client will suffer if the work doesn't get done. And so it definitely forced me to figure out how to work with people and say, hey, we're doing this for somebody else. It's not because I feel like you need to do it. It's because our client is going to suffer. Let's get it all done. Everybody takes a little piece of the job so that we don't feel all overwhelmed, even though I think everybody felt overwhelmed at the end of the day. But teamwork is going to be a part of it if you're doing a clinic that requires you guys to work in a team. Now, there are other kind of clinics that don't require it, but this particular one required it because it was a big job that we had to complete for this particular client. Okay, so I'm giving y'all some good information. Like I said, don't forget to hit that like button so that you can see more content from us every week. So the second clinic I did was a special education clinic. And what we did is ensure that children who had special education needs and were in the public school system, they were not being denied their due process rights. So many of them had IEPs, individualized education plans, which said that they don't learn the same way as the majority of the class. They need a certain kind of plan to help them learn. And you as a school have to make sure you implement it. And some of these schools they need to do what everybody else is doing, get on the book. No, you can't deprive them of their due process rights. You can't kick them out of school if they have behavioral issues, because some of their special education needs had some behavioral issues with it. So it was all about advocacy, advocating for our client, making sure that the school understood that these people they wanted to learn, but they needed some extra support. And you as a school and administration had to make sure that you gave them that support. We had some parents that were really hands-on and were advocates for their children. You had other parents that were not as hands-on. And so we had to kind of be that parental role for the child and say, listen, we need to make sure that these due process rights are not violated. You need to give them, no, you can't suspend them because they have behavioral issues, because you were supposed to be doing these things. So during that clinic, I got my hands dirty with the Individuals with Disability Education Act, IDEA. And this was my first, I didn't really know much about it, but this is my first chance of dealing with a federal law and how it's applied to children. And so it prepared me because if you watch my other video about how to get a judicial clerkship, when I actually interned for a judge in the federal court, one of my first assignments as an intern was to actually do a memo about how the IDEA applied to a particular case. And I was like, oh, I kind of know about this already because I actually did a clinic and saw hands-on how it works. And so that was a benefit to me and showed it was less of a learning curve when I got to the internship. and impressed my judge that I already had some kind of background information about how the IDEA works and how it's applied or how it's not applied, and why this particular plaintiff was actually suing for for violation of due process rights. So it all kind of lines up in other ways, and it helped me in my ultimate career trajectory, because like I said, if you watch my other videos, I ended up clerking after law school, and a lot of my experiences working with clients doing the community development clinic and in the special education clinic helped me in my interactions as a judicial law clerk, where I had to deal with opposing counsel, attorneys, trying to figure out what was going on. I already knew kind of how the process worked because I actually got my hands dirty and not just took the doctrinal classes, but actually did a clinic. So I would say that, like I said, hands down, do a clinic if you're able to do a clinic. Do two if you're able to do two. At my school, it was 7 credits each. So if you do really well, that could be a boost to your GPA as well if you're trying to make sure you rank higher. Some of the clinics may not have graded. I don't know how every school works, but my particular law school had graded clinics. And so that was good. I did well. And so therefore it was reflected in my GPA. So even if you don't plan on being an attorney, you want to be, let's say, a transactional attorney. So you're like, I don't need a clinic. Yes, you do, because even in transactional law, there's going to be certain things that you're going to have to do that you won't know about learning in a regular class. Just actually the transaction, like filing things. All those things you'll learn about when you're actually in the clinic. So it's not just about client interaction and you're saying just going to dismiss it because, oh, I'm not going to work with clients anyway. Oh, that's fine. Go ahead and still do that clinic because you will still get some hands-on information about how you're going to do your job as a lawyer. Like I said, listen to people when they say that law school doesn't really teach you how to be a lawyer, but a clinic definitely does. And so I would say sign up for at least one clinic before you graduate so that you can get that hands-on experience. And just even for the simple fact that you'll understand what you've been learning in the classroom as it applies to real life.